What would you do if the cleaning lady turned out to own the very company you worked for? Sounds impossible, right? But sometimes the most extraordinary truths hide in the most ordinary of disguises. Bright Future Enterprises, a name that once symbolized innovation, success, and promise. Nestled in the bustling tech hub of San Francisco, it was a company everyone wanted to be part of, a startup that grew into a multi-million-dollar powerhouse in just a few years. But behind the sleek offices and impressive profits, something wasn't right. The once thriving workplace was crumbling under the weight of exploitation, low morale, and questionable leadership. At the center of it all was Jake Harris, the CEO. Known for his sharp business acumen, he was admired by investors but feared by his employees. But in the shadows of the chaos, someone was quietly observing. Clara James, a name you wouldn't find on the company's website or employee roster. But she was there every single day, not as an executive or even a manager. Clara worked the night shift, mopping floors, emptying trash bins, and cleaning the very glass walls that separated her from the boardroom. What no one knew was that Clara was no ordinary janitor. She had a secret. Years ago, when Bright Future was just a fledgling idea, she'd believed in it so deeply that she invested her life savings into the company. But instead of sitting back as a silent shareholder, she chose a different path. Clara walked the halls of Bright Future day after day, not as a wealthy investor, but as someone who could truly see the company's inner workings. Why would someone like Clara, with everything to lose, take such a risk? Her reason was simple but powerful: integrity. She believed in the vision that Bright Future once stood for, a workplace where innovation thrived on fairness, respect, and collaboration. But what she saw unfolding under Jake's leadership was far from that dream. Clara was patient. She watched. She listened. She endured the subtle insults and the dismissive glances, because she knew something that no one else did. Change was coming. Jake Harris had no idea that the woman he barely noticed had the power to change everything. What happened next would not only expose Jake's darkest secrets, but also teach a powerful lesson in humility, justice, and the strength of quiet resilience. Clara's story isn't just about a CEO and a janitor. It's about how one woman's courage and determination proved that true power doesn't need to shout, it simply acts. Stay with us as we uncover the incredible journey of Clara James and how she transformed a toxic empire from the ground up. Because sometimes the smallest roles carry the biggest secrets. Let's begin. So, who was Clara James? To most people, she was just a cleaning lady, quiet, unassuming, and invisible in the eyes of those she worked alongside. But in reality, Clara was far from ordinary. Clara grew up in a modest home in Detroit, Michigan. Her parents were hard-working individuals who believed in earning your way with honesty and perseverance. They didn't have much, but they had integrity. Clara carried those values with her as she built her life. After college, she made a name for herself in the investment world. She wasn't one to chase quick profits or glamorous trends. Instead, she focused on businesses that aligned with her principles: innovation, fairness, and a genuine desire to make the world better. Years ago, Clara had come across Bright Future Enterprises when it was just an idea on a pitch deck. The founder, a young visionary, had big dreams of creating a tech company that didn't just make profits but also treated its employees like family. Clara believed in that vision and took a leap of faith, investing her hard-earned money into the startup. But things didn't go as planned. As Bright Future grew, it lost its way. The founder was pushed out, and the reins fell into the hands of Jake Harris, a man who saw people as nothing more than numbers on a spreadsheet. Stories of employee burnout, unethical practices, and a toxic work environment began to surface. For Clara, this wasn't just disappointing. It was personal. She had invested in more than a company. She had invested in a dream, a vision of what a workplace could be. Clara could have easily walked away, written it off as a failed investment and moved on. But that wasn't who she was. She had a unique way of doing things, a belief that to truly understand the soul of a company, you couldn't just look at reports or sit in boardrooms. You had to experience it. And that's exactly what she decided to do. But why a janitor? Of all the roles she could have chosen, why pick one at the very bottom of the ladder? Clara had a simple answer for that. You see people's true colors when they think you have nothing to offer them. She knew that from the perspective of a janitor, she could observe everything, the whispers in the break room, the way employees were treated, the decisions being made, and the culture that was thriving or deteriorating behind closed doors. From that vantage point, she could see the company's reality, not the polished version presented to investors or the media. So she traded her tailored suits for a uniform, swapped her portfolio for a mop, and stepped into a world that most people overlook. Clara wasn't there to clean floors. She was there to clean up something far bigger. It wasn't easy. Clara faced dismissive comments, cold stares, and the kind of invisibility that often comes with being in a role people take for granted. But she never flinched. Every insult, every harsh word, every long night was a piece of the puzzle she was quietly putting together. And while she seemed to blend into the background, Clara was gathering something far more valuable. Than dirt on a CEO, she was gathering the truth. Little did Jake Harris and his team know, the woman they barely noticed was about to turn their world upside down. The story of Clara James isn't just about uncovering corruption. It's about standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. And as Clara continued her journey, one thing became clear. Her decision to take the lowest role in the company wasn't just a strategy, it was a statement. What Clara discovered during her time at Bright Future would change everything. And when the time came, she wouldn't just expose the truth, she would remind everyone what real leadership looks like. Clara's days as a janitor were long and exhausting. Each morning, she arrived at Bright Future Enterprises before the first employee stepped through the door. Armed with a mop and bucket, she cleaned the vast hallways, the glass-walled conference rooms, and the executive offices that were filled with things she had once been accustomed to, except now, she was invisible in their world. From the start, Clara noticed the way people looked at her, or rather, didn't look at her. Employees walked past her as if she wasn't even there. Some left their trash in the hallways without a second thought, expecting her to pick it up. And Jake Harris, the CEO, wasn't just indifferent, he was actively dismissive. Jake had a way of making people feel small. "You missed a spot," he sneered one day, pointing at a corner of his office. Clara nodded quietly and cleaned it again, even though it was spotless. To him, she was just the janitor, someone to order around, someone unworthy of respect. But Clara didn't let his arrogance break her. She kept her head down, listening, observing, and learning. What she heard was heartbreaking. There was Sarah, a young marketing assistant, who often cried quietly at her desk after long meetings where Jake tore apart her work without offering any guidance. Then there was Mark, a senior developer who was once passionate about his job, but now struggled to meet deadlines because of the unrealistic demands placed on him. He confided in a colleague one day, saying, "I used to love working here. Now I just count down the hours until I can leave." Clara saw it all, the frustration, the exhaustion, the quiet despair that filled the air like an unspoken secret. She watched as employees avoided the break room, knowing Jake might walk in at any moment with another biting comment. She listened as they whispered about opportunities elsewhere, wondering if it was worth staying. But amidst the struggles, Clara also found glimmers of kindness. There was Emma, an intern who always smiled and said, "Good morning, Ms. Clara." Emma even helped Clara carry supplies. One afternoon when she noticed her struggling with a heavy load. And then there was Raj, a junior analyst, who stayed late one evening and offered Clara a cup of tea. "It's cold tonight," he said simply. These small acts of humanity reminded Clara why she had believed in Bright Future in the first place. Beneath the layers of corporate toxicity, there were still good people who cared about one another. Clara quietly took notes. not just on the company's flaws, but also on its potential. She wrote down Sarah's ideas that Jake had dismissed, knowing they were brilliant. She remembered Raj's kindness and Emma's optimism, recognizing that they represented the heart of what bright future could be. And while Jake and others saw her as just a janitor, Clara knew she was gathering something far more powerful than any report or presentation. She was collecting the truth, raw, unfiltered, and undeniable. Every mop stroke, every overheard conversation, every passing moment was bringing her closer to her purpose. The employees had no idea who Clara truly was, but they would soon find out. And when they did, it would change everything. What Clara endured wasn't just a job, it was a mission, and she was just getting started. Jake Harris, Bright Future's CEO, wasn't just an ineffective leader. He was a liability. To those outside the company, he appeared confident and ambitious, the kind of person who could take an organization to new heights. But inside those glass walls, a very different story unfolded. Under Jake's leadership, profit wasn't just the top priority, it was the only priority. Employees spoke in hushed tones about cost-cutting measures that bordered on unethical. Maintenance budgets were slashed, safety protocols ignored, and employee benefits quietly rolled back. One former manager had once raised concerns about workplace safety, but was soon demoted and eventually replaced. The message was clear: challenge Jake, and you'd pay the price. Jake's treatment of the staff was just as troubling. He thrived on public humiliation, often calling out employees in meetings for the smallest mistakes. Sarah, the young marketing assistant, had once been tasked with presenting an idea to the team. Jake interrupted her halfway through, declaring, "This is why we can't rely on amateurs." The room went silent, and Sarah barely finished the presentation. It wasn't just words. Jake's actions made life harder for everyone beneath him. He micromanaged projects while demanding impossible deadlines. Many employees worked overtime without compensation, driven by fear of losing their jobs. The bright, energetic office that had once been a place of innovation now felt suffocating. Clara, still working as the janitor, witnessed it all. And while Jake dismissed her as invisible, she was carefully piecing together a puzzle that would soon expose the truth. Her mop bucket became her cover, her cleaning rounds an opportunity to observe. Clara began keeping detailed notes, every instance of mistreatment, every corner cut, every story employees shared in whispered conversations. It wasn't long before she uncovered deeper cracks in Jake's leadership. Late one evening, as Clara cleaned the executive floor, she overheard Jake on a phone call. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but the words were unmistakable. "Just approve it," he said. "No one needs to know we're using cheaper materials. It'll save us a fortune." Clara froze, her hands tightening on the mop handle. That night, Clara made her first real breakthrough. Jake had left his office in a hurry, leaving his computer unlocked. Clara's heart raced as she stepped inside. On the screen were emails detailing altered financial records and backdoor deals that prioritized short-term profit over long-term sustainability. She quickly took photos of the screen with her phone before locking the office door behind her. But her investigations weren't without risk. One afternoon, as Clara emptied a trash can near Jake's desk, she noticed an open folder containing what looked like doctored invoices. Before she could examine them closely, Jake walked in. Clara quickly adjusted her posture, mumbling about cleaning supplies, and slipped away before he could notice her interest. Clara's documentation grew by the day. Emails, overheard conversations, and even employee testimonies. She was building a case that couldn't be ignored. But she knew she had to be careful. If Jake discovered her true identity or her intentions, it would all be over. Still, Clara wasn't just uncovering a failing leader. She was uncovering a system that had lost its way, a company that had strayed far from the values it was built upon. She wasn't just fighting for the employees or for Bright Future's reputation. She was fighting for the kind of workplace where people could thrive, where innovation and integrity could coexist. The deeper Clara dug, the more she realized how much was at stake. And while Jake Harris remained confident that his secrets were safe, he had no idea how close he was to being exposed. Clara's mission wasn't just to reveal the truth. It was to rebuild Bright Future from the ground up. But the journey was far from over, and the hardest battles were yet to come. There comes a moment in every story, a turning point when everything shifts, when the quiet observer becomes the active player. For Clara, that moment came when she could no longer stand by and watch. It had been a long, grueling journey, and Clara had seen so much, too much to ignore any longer. The employees were broken, the company was crumbling, and Jake's arrogance seemed to grow by the day. But it wasn't until one pivotal day that Clara knew she couldn't wait any longer. The incident was unexpected. Sarah, the marketing assistant, had reached her breaking point. She was exhausted, overwhelmed by the constant demands Jake placed on her. That afternoon, Clara overheard a conversation in the break room between Sarah and another colleague. Jake doesn't care about us. He doesn't even listen when I try to explain why we can't keep pushing these deadlines, Sarah said, her voice breaking. I'm working 2 jobs just to keep up, and for what? A paycheck that barely covers my bills. Clara's heart sank as she listened, feeling the weight of Sarah's words. The pressure, the exhaustion, the constant fear of failure. This wasn't just a few disgruntled employees. This was a toxic environment that had reached its breaking point. And for Clara, it was the final straw. Clara knew what she had to do. This wasn't just about uncovering Jake's corruption anymore. This was about saving the people who had trusted Bright Future to be their place of work, their safe haven. It was time for a change, and it had to come from the top. In the quiet hours after the office had emptied, Clara began her preparations. She gathered the evidence she had meticulously collected over the weeks, the emails, the photos, the recorded conversations. She knew it wasn't enough to simply expose Jake's wrongdoings. She needed to build a case strong enough to bring him down. The pressure was overwhelming. She had to be careful. She couldn't afford any mistakes. Every decision now carried weight. Clara contacted a trusted lawyer she'd known for years, someone who had helped her with past business ventures. She explained everything, the unethical practices, the exploitation, the mistreatment of employees, and asked for advice on how to proceed. The lawyer was clear. You have a strong case, but we need the board's attention. If you can't get them to act, it's all for nothing. Clara spent the next few days preparing. She booked an emergency board meeting, knowing full well that Jake would be furious when he found out. He wouldn't expect this, but she couldn't wait any longer. The board needed to see the truth before Jake had a chance to cover his tracks again. The stakes were high. If Jake discovered her plan, everything would fall apart. But Clara wasn't afraid anymore. She had witnessed the pain, the exhaustion, the fear in the eyes of the employees. They needed someone to speak up for them. In the quiet moments before the meeting, Clara stood alone in the hallway, feeling the weight of what she was about to do. This wasn't just about a company or a CEO. It was about doing the right thing, no matter the cost. And as she looked down at the evidence in her hands, Clara knew that this was the moment that would define everything. The turning point was here. The battle for Bright Future's future had begun. The air in the boardroom was thick with tension. The executives, already seated, exchanged glances, shifting in their chairs as they waited for the meeting to begin. The moment Clara stepped into the room, the atmosphere changed. Still dressed in her janitor's uniform, she walked in with quiet confidence. The same person they had all seen, cleaning the floors and wiping the counters. But today there was something different in her presence, something they hadn't noticed before. Her eyes were steady, her posture strong. This was not the same woman they thought they knew. The board members turned their attention to her, their expressions a mix of confusion and curiosity. Jake, sitting at the head of the table, looked up from his phone with a smirk. "What's this?" "The cleaning crew attending our meeting now," he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. Clara's response was simple yet powerful. "I'm Clara Langford," she said, her voice calm but unshakable, "the majority shareholder of Bright Future Enterprises." A stunned silence swept through the room. It was as if time itself had stopped. Eyes widened, jaws dropped, and even Jake's smirk faltered. No one could believe it. Not a janitor, not the woman they had dismissed for so long, was the one with the power to change everything. Clara placed a folder on the table in front of her. She knew what she was about to do would change everything. One by one, she pulled out the pieces of evidence, the emails, the recorded conversations, the altered financial reports, each one a nail in Jake's coffin. "As you can see," Clara began, her voice steady as she flipped through the pages, "Jake Davenport has not only exploited this company's resources for his own gain, but he has fostered a toxic environment where employees are overworked, underpaid and disregarded." The board members exchanged nervous glances as the truth began to sink in. Jake's arrogance had blinded him. He thought he was untouchable, invincible. But the evidence was undeniable. The room grew quiet as Clara methodically laid out each piece of the puzzle, her voice a quiet force cutting through the board's disbelief. She showed them the emails where Jake had made unethical deals, the recordings where he belittled employees, the financial records where he had funneled company funds into his own accounts. With every piece of evidence, the board's shock turned into outrage. Their disbelief morphed into anger. They had been blind to Jake's manipulation, his ruthless pursuit of profit at the expense of everyone else. Clara's voice, unwavering, echoed through the room. "And this," she said, her fingers lingering on one final document, "is the proof that Jake has been falsifying records to hide his actions from the board." Jake, for the first time in the meeting, stood up, his face flushed with rage. "This is absurd!" he shouted, his voice cracking with panic. "You can't do this. I've built this company. But Clara's gaze didn't waver. She had made her decision long ago. "I've been watching, listening, and today the truth will be heard," Clara said. "Jake Davenport, you are hereby dismissed from your position as CEO of Bright Future Enterprises, effective immediately. And you are not the only one. Any leader who has supported this toxic culture will follow you out the door." Jake's face went from red with anger to pale with defeat. He took a step back, as though trying to process the words. But the truth was undeniable. The board members were already whispering to one another, some nodding in agreement, others shaking their heads in disbelief. The room erupted. Some employees who had been quietly standing by the door, waiting to hear what would happen, let out a collective sigh of relief. Clara could see it in their eyes, hope. It was as if a weight had been lifted, not just from the boardroom, but from the entire company. Employees who had once feared for their jobs now stood taller. There were smiles, tears, and whispered words of gratitude. Some embraced one another, their shoulders lighter, their hearts a little less burdened. They knew that finally their voices had been heard. And Jake, his arrogance shattered into something far more vulnerable. He stood there, speechless, as the board turned their backs on him. The man who had once been in control was now nothing more than a relic of a toxic past, his empire crumbling beneath his feet. As Clara watched the fallout unfold, a small, quiet satisfaction filled her. She had done it, not just for herself, but for every person who had ever felt invisible, for every employee who had been mistreated. This was only the beginning. The real work was just starting, but Clara knew one thing for sure: Bright Future Enterprises was about to become something entirely new, something better. In the days following the big reveal, Clara wasted no time. Her first priority wasn't to solidify her position as CEO or to bask in her victory. It was to rebuild the trust that had been shattered over the years. Clara knew the weight of her responsibility. She had witnessed the suffering of the employees, the exhaustion in their eyes, the fear that permeated every corner of the office. Her first step was simple but profound: an apology. She called for a company-wide meeting, where she stood before the team, raw and genuine. "I know it's been hard," Clara began, her voice steady but full of emotion. "I know many of you have suffered under a leadership that didn't care about you. I am truly sorry for that. You deserve so much more than what you've gotten. But I'm here now, and I promise to do everything I can to make this right." It wasn't just the words that made an impact. It was the sincerity in her eyes, the conviction in her tone. Clara didn't just speak of change. She showed it. Her actions quickly followed her words. She implemented fair and transparent practices, no more secretive deals or unjust pay gaps. She introduced open-door policies, where employees felt comfortable voicing their concerns, knowing their words wouldn't be ignored. Clara ensured that no one would have to fear for their job, because they disagreed with management. For the first time in years, the culture of fear was replaced with a sense of safety, trust, and hope. The shift was noticeable. Employees who had once been disillusioned with the company began to speak up, not just about their concerns, but about the changes they were beginning to see. "I've worked here for over a decade," one longtime employee shared, her voice full of emotion. "And I've never felt this valued. Under Jake, we were just numbers. But now, Clara listens. She genuinely cares about us. It's like a weight has been lifted." Another employee added, "When I joined, I didn't know if I'd even last." The pressure was relentless. "But now I feel like I can breathe again. The environment is changing, and I can see it in how people are treating each other. It's not just about the work, it's about respect." And it wasn't just about words or intentions. Clara's leadership turned the company's performance around as well. Bright Future Enterprises, once drowning in internal chaos and financial mismanagement, began to thrive. Productivity increased as employees felt empowered to bring their best selves to work. The company's reputation, damaged beyond repair under Jake's rule, was slowly but surely restored. But Clara knew that the true success of this transformation wouldn't be measured in numbers alone. It would be measured in the people, the way they felt about coming to work, the way they felt about being part of something bigger than themselves. With the company now on a stable path, Clara turned her attention to the future. She gathered the team together once more, this time to share her vision. Her words were simple, yet they carried the weight of everything she had worked for, everything she had fought for. "I believe in a future where fairness isn't optional, it's the foundation," Clara said, her eyes scanning the room, meeting the gaze of every person present. "Where innovation comes from the heart of this company, not just the boardroom, and where mutual respect is the norm, not the exception. We are a team, and together we will build a future we can all be proud of." The room fell silent for a moment, the impact of her words sinking in. It wasn't just a vision for the company, it was a vision for a better way of doing business, a way that prioritized people over profit. It was a future they could all believe in. And with that, Bright Future Enterprises was reborn, not just as a company, but as a symbol of what happens when leadership truly listens, when values take precedence, and when people come together to rebuild what was once broken. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with Clara at the helm, there was no doubt they were on the path to something extraordinary. The future was bright indeed, and this time it was brighter for everyone. Clara's story is more than just one of triumph over adversity. It's a reminder of something deeply powerful that we all too often forget. True leadership doesn't come from titles or status. It comes from humility, from the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it seems like no one is watching. It comes from the strength to persevere, even when the odds are stacked against you, and from the belief that every small action can create ripples of change. Through Clara, we see how much strength lies in those we might overlook, the quiet, the unnoticed, the ones who toil behind the scenes. They might just be the very change this world needs. Clara was not the loudest voice in the room, nor the one with the most power. She was the one who saw beyond the surface, who believed in fairness and respect, and who fought for her vision, no matter how impossible it seemed at first. So what can we take away from her journey? It's simple. Never underestimate the power of your actions, no matter how small. Stand firm in your values. Be brave enough to challenge the status quo, and always believe that change is possible. Because just like Clara, you too might be the one to turn things around when everyone else has given up. What do you think? Have you ever faced a moment when you had to stand up for what's right, even when it wasn't easy? We'd love to hear your thoughts or any experiences that might resonate with Clara's journey. Share them in the comments below. And if Clara's story has inspired you, remember to like, share, and subscribe. There are more incredible stories, like this one waiting to be told. Stories of perseverance, hope, and the power of the human spirit. So stick with us and let's keep the conversation going. Together we can make a difference.